The year was 1945. The guns of World War II had finally fallen silent, but peace did not bring prosperity. Across Europe, a continent lay in ruins. Great cities, once centers of culture and commerce, were now just piles of rubble and ash. London, Berlin, Warsaw, all bore the deep scars of a long and terrible war. The fighting had destroyed homes and factories. It had torn apart roads and railways. The very foundations of modern life had been shattered, leaving millions of people without shelter, without work, and honestly, without hope for what tomorrow might bring. The human cost was immense. Families had been broken. People wandered through the wreckage of their former lives, searching for loved ones, searching for a reason to go on. Food was scarce, winters were harsh and cruel. People stood in long lines for a simple loaf of bread or a few potatoes. Hunger was a constant companion. Economies were broken. The systems that once produced goods and created jobs were gone. Governments were weak, struggling to provide even the most basic services for their citizens. It was a time of great suffering and uncertainty. The future looked bleak. Many feared that Europe would never recover. The destruction was simply too great. The misery was too deep. In this desperate atmosphere, new dangers began to grow. People who had nothing left to lose were drawn to extreme ideas. The Soviet Union, with its communist ideology, saw an opportunity in the chaos. It promised a different future, a future of order and equality. To the United States, watching from across the Atlantic, the spread of communism was a threat to the fragile peace that had been so dearly won. Something had to be done. Europe could not be left to collapse. The suffering of its people could not be ignored. A continent that had once been the center of the world was now on the brink of another disaster. It needed help. It needed a lifeline. It needed a plan that was as bold and ambitious as the challenges it faced. The world held its breath, waiting to see if a new kind of war, a war against poverty and despair, could be won before it was too late. A new chapter in history was about to be written. In the spring of 1947, a new idea began to take shape. It came from a man who had seen the devastation of war firsthand. His name was George C. Marshall. He was the United States Secretary of State. Marshall was a quiet, respected leader. He understood that Europe's problems were America's problems too. He believed that a strong, stable Europe was essential for world peace. On June 5, 1947, at Harvard University, he announced a plan. It was not a plan for war, but a plan for peace. It would come to be known as the Marshall Plan. The idea was simple but powerful. The United States would offer massive financial aid to help rebuild the countries of Europe. It was officially called the European Recovery Program, but the name that stuck was the Marshall Plan. It was a promise. It was a helping hand extended across the ocean. Marshall said that America's policy was not directed against any country or doctrine. It was directed against hunger, poverty, desperation, and chaos. He invited all the nations of Europe to work together to create a joint plan for their own recovery. The United States had its own reasons for this generosity. A broken Europe was a poor trading partner. American leaders knew that a prosperous Europe would buy American goods, helping the US economy stay strong. But there was a bigger fear. It was the fear of communism. In countries like France and Italy, communist parties were gaining support. People were desperate, and communism offered what seemed like a simple solution. The United States wanted to offer a better choice, a future built on freedom and democracy, not on Soviet control. The Marshall Plan was a bold move in the new Cold War. It was a statement that America would not stand by and watch Europe fall into darkness. The Soviet Union saw the plan as a threat. They called it dollar imperialism. They forbade the countries of Eastern Europe, which were under their control, from taking part. This created a clear division. The Iron Curtain, which Winston Churchill had spoken of, was now being reinforced. Europe was split in two, between a West that looked to America and an East that looked to Moscow. The Marshall Plan went into effect in 1948. Over the next 4 years, the United States sent more than $13 billion in aid to 16 European nations. This was an enormous sum of money at the time. The aid did not come in cash alone. It came in the form of food, fuel, and raw materials. It came as machinery to restart factories and tractors to plow fields. American experts also came to Europe. They shared their knowledge of business and industry. They helped European workers learn new more efficient ways of doing things. The aid was carefully managed. The European countries worked together through the Organization for European Economic Cooperation. They had to decide how the money would be spent. This forced old rivals like France and Germany to sit down at the same table. They had to cooperate. They had to plan for a shared future. The plan required them to lower trade barriers and work towards economic integration. It was not just about rebuilding what was lost. It was about building something new, something better, something stronger and more united than before. The results were astonishing. The Marshall Plan acted like fuel for Europe's economic engine. Factories that had been silent for years roared back to life. Farmers began to produce enough food to feed their own people. The economies of Western Europe grew faster than they ever had before. By 1952, when the plan ended, industrial production in the participating countries was 35% higher than it had been before the war. The threat of starvation faded. People found jobs. Hope began to return to the streets and cities of the continent. This economic revival had a profound political impact. As life got better, the appeal of communism faded. The democratic governments of Western Europe grew stronger and more stable. The Marshall Plan showed that capitalism and democracy could deliver a better life for ordinary people. It helped to create a powerful and prosperous Western Europe. This new Europe would become a key ally of the United States in the long ideological struggle against the Soviet Union. The plan did more than rebuild buildings. It rebuilt faith in a free society. The Marshall Plan officially ended in 1952, but its legacy continues to shape our world today. Its most immediate success was the economic miracle it helped to create. It laid the groundwork for decades of unprecedented growth and prosperity in Western Europe. The continent that had been on its knees was now standing tall again. This new strength allowed Europe to become a full partner with the United States. It created a strong transatlantic alliance that would define the second half of the 20th century and provide a shield against Soviet aggression. Perhaps the most important long-term benefit was the spirit of cooperation it fostered. For the first time, European nations worked together on a massive scale. They learned that their common interests were greater than their old rivalries. The Organization for European Economic Cooperation was the seed from which later institutions would grow. It was a first step on the long road toward the European Union. The idea that France and Germany could be partners, not enemies, was revolutionary. The Marshall Plan helped to make that idea a reality. The plan also changed the way America saw its role in the world. It marked a departure from the country's traditional isolationism. The United States accepted that it had a responsibility to lead and to help others. The Marshall Plan became a model for future foreign aid programs. It showed that helping other nations could be a powerful tool of foreign policy. It was an investment in peace and stability that paid dividends for generations. It cemented America's position as a global leader, a role it would continue to play for many years to come. Today, 80 years after the end of the war, Europe stands as a testament to the plan's success. It is a continent largely at peace, united in a common market, and bound by shared democratic values. The scars of the war have healed, though the memory remains. The Marshall Plan was a turning point. It was an act of enlightened self-interest and extraordinary generosity. It proved that after the destruction of war, nations could choose to build a better world together. It was, as one leader called it, a generous, far-sighted and creative act.